Hello and welcome to Pod Street, the Writing WA podcast. I am not Will Yeoman, I'm Laurie Steed. I'm the Partnerships and Development Manager here at Writing WA, and today's guest is Brooke Dunnell. Brooke Dunnell is a writer, mentor and workshop facilitator. Her short fiction has been widely published, including in the short story collection Females and Dogs, which was a finalist for the 2020 Carmel Digital Literary Award and shortlisted for the 2021 Woollahra Digital Literary Award. The unpublished manuscript for The Glass House, her debut novel, was the winner of the 2021 Fogarty Literary Award. Brooke has a PhD in creative writing from the University of Western Australia and lives in Boorloo, Perth, with her husband and two dogs, and her new novel, Last Best Chance, will be published in 2024. Welcome, Brooke.
Hi.
So, Brooke, obviously you've been working at this game for a while now.
Longer than I'd like to count.
Talk us through those early days, as you first found your feet as a writer, when you remember things heading in that direction and why you went to the page in the first place.
I'm one of those people who was like, always writing stories. Wrote a story when I was 6, illustrated this story about a man who woke up and all his teeth had fallen out, and then at the end it was all a dream. So I explored that twist ending very early. And then we'd have this kind of, the boxy PC computer you'd have in the computer room in the house.
Yes.
And when it was my turn, it would always be writing these stories. My stories would never end, which I think was instructive for... Yeah, that was a problem that I dealt with later. But I don't know, I just always wanted to... I loved reading, obviously, and then I don't know, I guess I just thought I could do it, which was good. And I think a couple of things kind of shaped what I understood about writing was, first of all, was I got the Stephen King book on writing when it came out. So I was probably about 15. And for those who haven't heard of it, although if you've been to one of my workshops, you've definitely heard of it. But it's like half memoir and half kind of writing guide.
Yes.
And at the time I did read a lot of Stephen King, but that was because one of my brothers read him and I used to do everything that my brothers did. But it's a really good book, and it's a really instructive on really straightforward writing advice about, getting rid of adverbs and starting the story where it starts instead of before and all that kind of stuff. But he's got this section in there, which is obviously, it's the year 2000. It's designed for American audiences. And this instruction on kind of how to get an agent.
Oh, wow.
And it basically, the example is this, he said it's an amalgamation of a couple of writers he knows, but this teacher who has these 6 short stories published and then sends a novel to an agent and has this cover letter in there. And I think I was way too literal about it. And I was like, so you get some short stories published and then you write a book. So I kind of did that. But luckily for me, I really enjoyed writing short stories. So I just started in high school being okay, well now I've got to write some short stories so that I can get my book published. And then...
Well, it worked. It had a different timeline, but it worked.
It did. And also, it's not it wasn't going for an agent. I think, by the time I was in my early 20s and stuff, I realised, that advice is from the late 90s and from the United States, and also not necessarily what I want to do. Yeah. But I think that was just in my subconscious, just guiding me, you have to have 6 short stories published and then you write a book kind of thing.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I think that's my villain origin story kind of thing.
That's really interesting, and I think you're right that on some level there's this idea of doing one's time from our generation of writers too, where you're kind of assuming there will be time where you're just working on your craft and developing your craft. Yeah. I remember my father said to me at one point, well, of course, it's 10,000 hours of working on the craft and then you'll get somewhere. Yeah. Did you have any sort of advice or anyone around you at your early career stage that was guiding you as to what to expect and how it was going to turn out?
I don't know about advice. I had, lucky for me, again, I had a lot of support. No one was ever going, oh my God, get a real job kind of thing, which was very lucky because I'm very suggestible. But I had, my parents were cool with it. My mum would buy, like, she bought me, which the other kind of guiding text for me when I was around that age was she bought me the Australian Writers Marketplace from 2005, which I still have on my bookshelf. And she would like send me writing competitions that she'd seen, and then my great aunt, my grandmother's sister, was a children's book writer, and she also wrote non-fiction and stuff as well. So in my family, being a writer was a job you could do. And then I also had like high school teachers who were very supportive and stuff, but I don't really recall any kind of pivotal advice the way I recall it. I'm sure I was getting it, but the things that stick in my mind are the Stephen King advice. Yeah. But I definitely heard the 10,000 hours. Yep. And that kind of thing, and also, you know, if you're good at writing, you should be a journalist, which I tried and did not really go very well. But no, I never. Yeah, there's not any that kind of sticks out to me, unfortunately.
But you had like a pivotal breakthrough at a point, didn't you? There was like a US competition or something like that you got a shortlisting in or recognition in from memory?
There used to be a competition, I don't think it exists anymore, called the National Short Story Award, which always sounds very... sounds good, doesn't it? And it was done by the University of Canberra. And I came second in that,
great.
I think.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. And when was that?
2004.
Oh,
yeah, so
almost 20 years ago now. Yeah, wow.
God, don't tell me that. But then also, I'd been on holiday with my cousin after school ended, and we went to Sydney and went to this McDonald's on Pitt Street and saw some unhoused people and things like that. And I think it was my first... Because I think the things I used to make up before that were totally... invented, even though they were realism. They were just, you know, I don't know where I got... They were the kind of things that should be a story, I suppose, in inverted commas. And this one, I was like, what if this situation, but slightly different? And, yeah, I'm pretty sure it came second. But that was also... Not only was that like, you know, I've been recognised, you know, nationally and got that kind of... As all writers know, you need that reassurance along the way that you're on the right track and things like that. But I think it was also probably one of the first times that I can remember where that idea of something I've experienced or tangentially experienced, but in a boring way, kind of twisted into fiction, which tends to be my approach these days, I think, usually. So, yeah. Yeah.
And were there any other competing desires other than writing? I know if there weren't, there's been certain other jobs you've done, though, that might give you interesting insight. So if there weren't competing desires, do you want to talk a little bit about the kinds of work you've done while writing?
Yeah. Well, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress.
Yep.
And also that was another thing where I thought, this was prior to the Stephen King book, but I thought, you get an agent and then you go on Home and Away and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think because there was another kid in primary school who we were like into it, and I think I went home and said to my mum, like, can you take me to some auditions? Like, I don't know where I was getting these ideas from because we live in Perth and stuff. And she was just like, no. I was like, okay. So that kind of fell over. But, and so then, I did... have the kind of the idea of if you like writing and you like history, you should be a journalist. So I did do journalism and English at uni and did some prac, which was very interesting. It just taught me that I don't like writing about real things, and I find it quite stressful to be like in the middle of actual things, and I really prefer stuff to be made up and kind of
interesting,
invented in my head. So then I kind of went straight through and did honours and then a PhD straight away, which was really, it was really good for me, and I obviously like avoiding the real world as much as possible. But there's definitely something to be said, like the people I know who, whether they've done a PhD or not, but they've had these like completely writing separate careers that they are able to infuse into their writing is always, I think, really beneficial. But I've dabbled in some stuff. I've done some the requisite supermarket work and things like that, and I did a bit of media monitoring, which is when you listen to news and radio, TV and radio news stories, and summarise the articles for people, which I found very interesting. and then some kind of like entering traffic stuff into GPSs.
That was the one I always found the most interesting. I always imagined a mildly like flustered Brooke driving around tracking street coordinates. I just thought, wow, okay, that sounds like a fun job.
It was basically when you drive. It was fun, and I listened to the radio all day, listened to podcasts all day, very cruisy. But you're just like going to check that the app is saying that there's roadworks here, so go and check. Are there roadworks there? Yeah, because you can't really chase down. The app is saying that there's a prang on, the Great Eastern Highway. By the time you get there, it'll be gone. But
it makes you a great conversationalist at parties because you're like, did you see the roadworks on that road? They were totally there. I nailed that. I knew they were there.
And did you see they changed lanes this week and things like that? Yeah, not super conversation starter.
Well, to change lanes slightly, see what I did there. One of the things I'm really interested, having, been writing similar sort of length to yourself.
Yeah.
Is there a point where, because we begin with our Kate Granville books or our Stephen King writing books, Carmel, Bird, Dear Writer, is there a point, or has there been a point in your career where you sort of lean more into intuition and were like, okay, I'm not sure what much more I'm going to get out of writing text, or have you always had writing guides, even up till now, that you're still consulting and still thinking about the craft?
I definitely have them and read them. Yeah, thinking about the craft also because I do a lot of teaching now, and it's nice to be able to have external advice other than just myself saying stuff. I mostly find that the things that I see are usually reiterating something that I found important somewhere else, and then just getting that reassurance that, more than one place is saying, for example, don't you think you've started the story, but the story actually starts halfway through or something like that. So I tend to find the things that I come across lately is just, reiterating things that that are things that I tell other people and that I really think for myself as well. Yeah.
And is there anything about the craft or about the industry that you could tell your younger self, knowing what you know now, that would really change the way you went about things?
I think what I would tell myself, and this is maybe a craft and industry thing, would be you're not going to get a book published in your 20s, and that's a good thing because you can't handle it.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. Oh my gosh, yes.
Yeah, because I thought, I kind of thought, especially with that Stephen King book, getting it when you're 15 and going, okay, I'll get my 6 stories out the way. Let's say I get 6 publications a year. I'll be 21. I mean, 1 publication a year for 6 years. I'll be 21, and then I'll write my book and I'll be famous like Sonia Hartnett kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And that did not happen, and that is good because all I was, in my 20s, I was just an anxious mess and like not sure what I was doing, couldn't get a grip on anything, couldn't get a grip basically. And so I think, if I told 15-year-old Brooke, you're not going to be Sonia Hartnett, 15-year-old Brooke would be devoed because she thought she was going to be on Home and Away and be Sonia Hartnett. Yeah.
So and she'd be like Elsa on Home and Away, Sonia Hartnett on the show.
Yeah. You're not going to be Beck Hewitt, you're not going to be Sonia Hartnett. But that's good because that would not be a good thing for you if that were to have happened, I guess. Which,
and I guess there's humility, a necessary humility in the path of not getting what you want straight away. Yeah. And so I think it does make for good literary citizens if one has to struggle, because then it ceases to be all about you day in, day out. Yeah. And you have to exist within the greater infrastructure and work with people and help others, and they help you.
Yes. Yeah, which is all very important. And I do think that even when people seem to be like overnight successes, they have been working really hard, because I do think it's really hard to, like, people don't, whether it's publishers or whether you're self-published, people, it's not usually a fluke. Like you have tried and you know what you're doing, and like it's usually not your first manuscript and all that kind of stuff. And so people can seem like they came out of nowhere, but they've usually got, yours and my level of experience or years of doing it and trying behiund them as well.
And certainly with yourself winning the Fogarty Literary Prize, is that the best way to... Literary Award, my apologies. You have incredible publications prior to that point. You've got, I think, 2 Best Australian stories. You've got a lot of quality stories produced. You're doing a PhD.
Yeah.
You're dedicated to the craft all that time beforehand. And one of the funny things I've always thought is your sort of dedication to doing that in a quiet, measured way. Like most writers I meet are sort of furious about a tiniest slight, and you're like, oh no, playing the long game here. I got a bigger purpose going on. So let's move on to the Glass House, because it's wonderful.
Thank you.
One of the things I wanted to know, and I guess, look, I'll get straight into it. I'm sure you've been asked about it before. You've got an incredible character in Davina in the book.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a little bit? Because obviously you've got Julia Lambert, who's a wonderful character too, and a complex character, and the protagonist.
Yeah.
Now, once you set up a character like Julia, do you think I need an antagonistic force, or do you think about a type of person you've come across in your life and how interesting it would be for them to be in the narrative? What's your process there?
So one thing that I had heard, this is going a bit further back from your question, but one thing I'd heard recently, which I think is great advice, was what year is it? This year. It was on a panel with Jock Sarong, who's like wonderful. He's wonderful books about the peninsula, whose name I'm forgetting at the moment, but the historical fiction set in Tasmania and stuff. He said, because it was about being a writer more so than his books, and he said he finds, like, the question was, when do you know you've got enough material for a novel?
Yes.
And he said he finds ideas start sticking together.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, that's exactly the experience that I had, because with The Glass House, I had this similar-ish manuscript which I had done a couple of years earlier, which had a lot of the same themes. You know, the character wasn't called Julia, but she was having problems with her husband and went back to kind of unpack an adult parent's house, but it was a very static novel because she'd divorced her husband and her parent had died. Yeah. So it was just a lot of ruminating and things like that. True to my life, but not so interesting in fiction. And then when I thought, look, I like this kind of concept, but I feel like I need to like refresh it and start it again, these other ideas started sticking to it. So the first one was the kind of dream sequences of her stepdaughter on a bus. Yep. That one was kind of me remembering, you know, taking the bus out to Carousel when I was a teenager and things like that. And it was also like an experiment in trying to write without using a pronoun very much, because I wanted it to be like dreamy and you don't really know, are you watching the character or are you the character kind of thing. And then the other idea was, I'd had this kind of maybe thriller idea, although I don't really read thrillers, so goodness knows what would have happened, but of maybe an old friend kind of coming out of the woodwork offering to be a surrogate for someone who can't carry a baby on their own, and then, like, you know, it being really dodgy and getting up in their business and things like that. And it kind of softened from there because, like I said, I'm not a thriller writer, but and Davina does offer to be Julia's surrogate at one point, but it's not a major part of the story. It's
just indicative of her sort of boundary crossing persona.
Yeah. And so I think the type of person who might do that in a very kind of, we haven't seen each other for 20 years, but I managed to wrangle out of you that you're having trouble having a baby, and so I'm going to just offer this very intimate thing to you as if it's nothing. Yeah. And I was kind of like, oh, what kind of person might do that? And then so it kind of reverse engineered from there. And so I guess it is good because I do find I have a lot of empathy for Julia, but she's not the most fascinating character, I don't think. Sure. And I think she's very closed down, private, doesn't really know what she wants, has lived her life kind of by the guidance of other people. So she's quite... she doesn't really know who she is. But it was good to have a Davina to bounce off her who is just like, will just say anything and wear anything and very, you know, cagey, but also will tell you the most intimate things about herself, and just that kind of, studying contrasts of like everything Julia is not.
That's a really good point. I've thought that before, both with The Glass House and with some of your short fiction, that often I find the protagonists are the most interesting character in some ways, because usually they're like I'm not sure what I am.
Yeah.
And then someone will enter the space which is very much what they're not, and that will be a defining point for them. They'll go, well, I'm not that.
Yeah.
That is not something I want to be of or be part of. So I find that really interesting with your work.
Thank you.
So with the Fogarty Prize, is that a conscious thing where you're like, this is the spot, I'm going to hit this, I'll give it my best shot? Like, you were always conscious of that was the opportunity you wanted to go for it?
Yeah, it was... I work really well to a deadline.
Yep.
Otherwise, I am very, faffing about and just not anything getting done because there's always tomorrow and things like that. And so I think it was about a year out and I saw, look, this literary prize is coming up. It's only been held once before, but it was already quite prestigious. Beck Higgy did really well out of it and doing really well now as well with the yarn and things. So short story writer and novelist.
That's it. Double threat.
Double threat, yeah. And so it was about a year out. I wanted to redo this, core of a manuscript idea into a whole new novel with the sticky kind of ideas sticking to it. And also with the Fogarty, it's for under 35s.
Yeah.
And it was going to be the only and last time I could enter it because I turned 35 a week after it was due.
Oh my gosh.
So that was quite motivating.
Yeah,
I thought, look, and it was good. Not that, entering something that didn't have an age deadline and I could then enter again wouldn't have been motivating, but I think there was something particularly motivating of going, oh, this is my one go at this thing. So yeah, it was really, it helped put this, and I actually worked, I had this kind of spreadsheet of, I need to have third draft 80,000 words by April.
Yeah.
And then you work backwards, okay, so when do I want my first draft done and stuff. And I was able to kind of even stick to a word count every day. So that was, so it was incredibly motivating to go for that one. And
even what you said about all that prep that leads to this point, like a manuscript prior that was a sort of like that but different, and you've developed that. And was the Glass House the one you worked with Curtis Brown, or that was Last Best Chance? So Curtis Brown was, so that's the program, the manuscript development program. No, that was actually the kind of staticky novel. Interesting.
So that was prior to that.
That's fascinating in itself, because I think sometimes writers get so attached in the outcome from doing that type of development that they don't realise the outcome might be the next thing after that or something like that. Yeah, I think that... What were the key takeaways from that time?
So the Curtis Brown, it was one of those ones that's like 6 months... I'll be remembering the details wrong, but it was something like you had to submit 5,000 words a month. Every 2 weeks, 3 people in the group had their stuff workshopped. You got 2 Zoom meetings with the tutor and things like that. So it was like not a full-time job or anything, but fairly intensive and fairly it wasn't just an at-your-own-pace thing. It was a feedback guided. You had to give other people feedback. You had a certain amount of feedback to show you were participating and things like that. And I think for me, that was just like getting back into that kind of... Because it was very much like what I'd done at uni, I think.
Yes.
More kind of like intense and short and stuff, but... I hadn't really had been giving people regular feedback and had that kind of deadline-based thing since I'd done my PhD, and I think I just realised, I benefit from this so much. And then, so I think one of the takeaways, very kind of pragmatic, was that, okay, the Fogarty's in a year, I want to write a new book, and I do need a deadline kind of structure going on and a word count in order to make it to that point.
And this was in the UK, wasn't it? Not in Australia?
Yeah, so I did the UK one, but it was all online.
No, that's all right. That gives me a better understanding of it too.
Yeah.
I think it's such an exciting and heartening story of dedication. And I think most writers, especially emerging writers, it would benefit them to know that a point at which they feel like, this isn't coming together, is a point prior to the point where it all comes together and things hit.
I've said that to people since. I've been like when they're having issues with their manuscript or writer's block or whatever, I've said you don't realise how close you could be to something good happening, and then when something good happens you'll almost won't remember this. Yes, that's right. And it's, it can sound kind of like trite advice, but you just see it happen so often that I'm like, it probably something good is going to happen, or just this will help you in some other way that you don't realise now.
It almost feels like universal law in some ways. Like you can't put that much dedication and ongoing hard work into development of your craft without things happening.
Yeah.
They might not happen when you want them to happen immediately or in the way you want them to happen.
Yeah.
But something tends to come through to back your dedication to it. Yeah. Speaking of which, you have another novel on the way, Last Best Chance.
Yes.
That's coming out mid-2024, is that right?
Yeah, early April.
Early April, that's not long at all to wait.
No.
So do you see Last Best Chance sitting alongside Glasshouse? Do you see it as a departure? What's your sort of take on the things you're writing and how you're developing?
I would like to think that it's a step up.
Yeah, okay.
But
nice.
Having said that, now that I've put that out there, I'll probably crash down off that step, It's not... I think people who liked The Glass House will hopefully like Last Best Chance as well. It's a little bit more... because The Glass House is quite... even though I don't name the suburb that it's set in or anything, it's quite set in a real... location, and one of the good things about writing it and promoting it is that a lot of people have said to me, I know those houses in that area and things like that. But in Last Best Chance, I've kind of imagined a country that doesn't exist. So it might feel a little bit disorienting, but that's kind of one of the aims of it.
Yes.
But it's got 2 main characters instead of 1, so that's a departure, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
And also set over quite a shorter period of time, a kind of near future kind of thing, not speculative at all, but that kind of what if scenarios more so than because The Glass House is a lot about what had happened in the future and unpacking, dealing with that, and then this is about what could happen in the future, I guess. So in that way, maybe they do match each other. Yeah.
I'm really excited to read it. I feel like one of the things I like about what Last Best Chance sounds like is this idea of the individual consciousness being influenced by and stepping into a greater global consciousness and things outside, and the way the world's shaping our views and our perceptions of things. So this idea of, I guess, individual to individual connection within that space is always interesting to me, because there's never been a more heightened time for people's individual realities.
Yes.
So it's made for conflict, and it's such an interesting space. So I think certainly to me it feels timely. I'm no literary expert, but it seems like the right book coming in at the right time. So I'd agree with you there.
That's good.
And I think, like you say, ideally we're always stepping up a little bit each time, right?
Yeah.
We go, okay, I know this now that I didn't know before. And do you see yourself now as a sort of a career intelligent women's fiction novelist? Is that sort of your wheelhouse now, or
that
you're
would
still
be the goal? I think, because I really like being a novelist. I still like the short story writing, and I'm still writing short stories at the same time. Have a short story out in Westerly at the moment.
Oh, wonderful. Congratulations.
Cling, cling, clang, clang. Anyway, but yeah, I like this combination of whatever suits the idea is the length at which the piece will become. And sometimes you have an idea and you know, it's kind of a crystallised small idea, nothing sticks to it in that kind of jocks the wrong sense. So, it's like a short story idea, and then you have kind of like a bigger idea, maybe grander themes, longer period of time, more characters, whatever's going on, and it kind of suits a novelist idea. But yeah, I think, that kind of contemporary fiction kind of interesting realist characters facing kind of personal issues as well as wider kind of global issue, or the personal is political and all that kind of stuff, is the stuff that I read. So therefore, naturally the stuff that I write. And like with The Glass House, I'd had this idea that, a thriller with a woman who is like a surrogate. Well, I don't really read thrillers, so I don't know how thrillers work. And I'd probably do something and everyone would be like, yeah, there's like a million books like that as well. So I do, another bit of advice, which I also do seem to come across a lot, is that it's natural you write what you'd like to read.
Yes,
and
that's
that's
correct.
been something with that I've tried to fall back on with The Glass House and now Last Best Chance is going, okay, I tried to make it as good as possible. Obviously, I had a wonderful editor with Georgia at Fremantle Press, you know, and then I really like the title, I really like the cover, I really like the blurb. I think that's the kind of book I would pick up and enjoy. And then I think, what else can you do?
That's I think you're right. Like, you're living exactly the kind of career you wanted to live, probably at a point, even if it wasn't the 15-year-old Brooke.
Yeah.
There was a part of Brooke that showed up at some point and said, oh, no, I know what I'm doing here. This is my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And Brooke, you're also part of the 2024 Perth Festival Writers Weekend.
Oh, that's so exciting.
I know, right? The Glittering Prize. Tell us a bit about your panel, who's on it, and the date, if you can remember.
I believe it's Saturday, the 24th of Feb.
That's correct.
And so it's called the Glittering Prize. It's about writers whose career has been launched in a way by winning these prizes.
Yes.
So there's going to be Shankari Chandran, and who won the Miles Franklin, which
pretty good. Yep.
Brain exploded. Chai Time at Cinnamon Gardens. Pardon me. And then Molly Schmidt, who won the City of Fremantle Hungerford Award for her books recently come out, Salt River Road.
Yes.
She's amazing as well. And then little old me. And we're going to talk about kind of like how I assume anyway, how the prize kind of launched us, what our books are like, what it's kind of like, trying to write a second book, all that kind of stuff as well. It should be really, really interesting.
Wonderful and very timely.
Yeah.
Well, Brooke, it seems we've come to the end of our interview, but it's wonderful to have had you here.
Thank you for having me.
This is Pod Street. I'm Laurie Steed. You can find out all about Writing WA on various socials. And we are here, we are there, and we are hopefully doing great things for writers in this state. But in the meantime, all that remains is for me to say thank you very much, Brooke, and all the best with Last Best Chance.
Thank you, and thank you, Writing WA.